Hey, what's up? If my audio's bad, there's nothing I can do about it, so don't yell at me. But I was just thinking about. Hold on. Ooh. I was just thinking about the Mass Effect series and how I loved it so much. And I was also thinking about Dragon Age. I actually love Dragon Age Origins. I also love how basically after the game's release, even for years later, um, the modding community had taken like the game under its wing, if that's a weird way to phrase it, and fixed a lot of things. Where if the game had original bugs or something, just stuff that happened, the modders fixed it. And they even went so far as some of them even went into the game's code and actually changed a few things to even make small improvements where the effects were a little bit better, where they weren't as demanding on the game, to even just graphical tweaks to the world and the environment and the characters. So a lot of makeup and stuff like that, I guess you can say, but actually functional stuff to make the game better. And I like that. I like that a lot. Now, the thing about BioWare that's so sad to me is that I remember not really being familiar with BioWare. I never really, I was a young guy and I never really paid attention to that stuff. I think I was still in school. But I remember playing hours and hours and hours and hours of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And then, years later down the line, I actually read more about how and learned about how that game actually got made, and that originally it was supposed to be a Luke Skywalker game, but then they were like, "Hey, what if we did our own thing?" And they had to get permission, and they did get permission, and then they're like, "Okay, here's our original adventure. What are we gonna do?" And I love it. It's like that. It still feels good after all these years, even though at the time I didn't really understand a lot of the mechanics as thoroughly as I thought. But but now that I'm older, I still really love the gameplay. And the sequel game, unfortunately, had a few problems with development, but the modding community came in and fixed it again, and even brought back some old content, which is really cool. And with Dragon Age Origins, I really, really dug it. And I loved it, and I loved the fantasy world that they created. Unfortunately, the second game, well, that was in a development hell. I'm not sure if it was really a development hell, maybe limbo, because the game did get postponed. It did get heavily influenced and by outside forces and stuff, and a lot of interference as well as some other problems going on. And it's kind of regarded as the worst Dragon Age game, and I can see why. And when I was younger, I didn't really see all the problems until I played. I tried to play the game again, just like Origins, and try to do things differently. And after the second or third playthrough, I'm like, I don't really like this that much, even with the DLCs. But then you had Dragon Age Inquisition. And I gotta say, for what it got right, it got a lot of stuff wrong, and it got more stuff wrong than not. Even when the studio was kind of forced to use uh, a game engine that's not compatible with the game they're making. So BioWare started strong, and a lot of people loved it, but over time, it had more and more interference as well as some bad decisions. And you see this too with Mass Effect. Nobody and their mother, nobody in the world will ever say Mass Effect had the best combat system ever. No one will ever say that. But at the same time, it was still a fun world that has so many fans. Well, why is that? I love the world. I love the characters. Ask anyone else. Ask anyone that's a fan of Mass Effect, what will they talk about? They'll talk about the ships, they'll talk about the aliens, they'll talk about the universe, because it's cool. And also, it's full of a lot of fun details that aren't necessary but make it cool. If you look in the codex, it's actually backed up by real world science. My favorite fun fact is that Palaven, when the Turians come from, their sun gets off radiation, so a lot of the animals and plants have like this covering because the scales on the Turians, they're metallic, and there's even a thing where people think it's bulletproof, but it's not. So they do have metallic scales in them, but it's just designed to prevent their bodies from being able to handle their sun's radiation. That's a cool little nerdy thing that they in no way, shape, or form had to include in the game, but they did, and that's fun. And it's also a lot of little things like that that you'll find if you actually read sit through the codex. A lot of fun science and different interpretations. It's really cool. All these little details. But then you had Mass Effect 2, which I loved. I loved it. But it was a lot of hit or miss with a lot of fans. There's a lot of different. It's not split down the middle, but there's different groups that say, "Oh, it was awesome. Oh, it sucked. Oh, it was good. I really liked the new things they did, but it had a few things wrong." So there's a lot of different camps. I did love it, and there was one or two things I would change. The most egregious was Legion, which was kind of, if you look it up, it was kind of proven because they even said that with Legion, they had to push his mission in the back because of certain development design issues. So Legion does have a lot of dialogue in the game and has a lot of choices in the game. Well, not choices, but a lot more to learn from him to gain his loyalty. But because they had to shove him towards the back of the game, the only way to get to know him and unlock all of his dialogue options is to get a pretty bad ending to the game by wasting time. But I do like that it broadens the world. But then the third game came out, which I thought was fine. And that's a whole nother thing. But you saw this trend with Bioware games where in the beginning the games were really cool and things are going good. And I love Kreia from, Knights of the Old Republic 2. That was awesome. Kreia's my favorite character. But then over the years the quality tended to slip. Dragon Age 2 is the worst one. Dragon Age 3, it's okay, but their level scaling kind of sucks. And there's so many other little things. And then they made Andromeda. And for years and years, people were speculating about it. People wanted to play it. People wanted to learn more about the story. Some people were on the fence. Some people got excited about this new chapter. And, well, it's crap. And I don't care what no one says. Combat is fine. But if you look at Mass Effect Andromeda, people did even improve the combat that people said was fine and okay. The modding community improved it so much more. They improved how the weapons feel. They improved the freaking menus, which were a nightmare. They also improved doing the different detonations of combining different abilities. The modders came in and modified this game so heavy that it could be okay to play, and it could feel a lot better to play. I think there's even a first-person mode that you can have for the game as well. So, just because people might say, well, they can fix it and they'll just patch it. I don't think that's a good excuse. And just because the modding community will come in and fix a bug or add a new skybox doesn't mean that that's a solution. The Bioware company kind of sucks. And to me, it's not the same people because, of course, a lot of people left. Same thing with Bungie. So, at the end of the day, you kind of like have... I think of these studios, Bungie and Bioware, and all these studios I used to love. And you kind of think of them as... like a castle. And it was under siege by another castle. Let's say EA is the invading army. So what they did was a lot of the people that were in the castle, they just escaped. Some of them ran away. Some of them were killed. Some of them were coerced, like, hey, work for me, or your lands are gonna be mine. You gotta do what I say. So originally, you don't have the same kingdom, is what I'm trying to say in my terrible analogy. So you kind of have the remains of a ruined kingdom, but it's kind of like the governor or the king or something. He's still the king, but he's just a figurehead because now here comes the other guy coming in, coming to collect the taxes. So it's kind of like a ruined kingdom. And EA is notorious for killing studios. Notorious, notorious. And it's actually pretty smart because what that is, it's actually a tactic. I'm not saying it's 100% proven, but it's what you do is you buy something. So let's say I were to buy BioWare. So I'm EA and I bought BioWare. Now if I run BioWare into the ground and shut down the studio, it doesn't matter because I own them. I own the name, I own the games that they make. So I forget what the technical term is. Forgive me. But basically, the idea is you shut down the studios, but then you have the recipe, for all their stuff, and you have the rights to make their stuff and produce it. So for the devs that made Dead Space, if the studio goes under and they quit because they're like screw this, it doesn't matter because they have the rights to the game and all future games and to make more games. So they don't really need the original people. That doesn't mean you'll get the same quality, but that's what it means. So they're just acquiring, it's like IP. It's IP farming, I think is the term. So then you saw this big explosion in indie development. But the thing that sucks is that you you don't really get that same feel. You don't really get that same BioWare magic that they used to have, that had these fans dress up as their characters and paint their faces blue and talk about it and make fan fictions and artwork. You don't really see that same excitement. And it's kind of difficult to explain what that's like because the people who might play games today, they think, oh, no, it's good. No, no, it's fine. But I don't know. I just don't think that they've. Because I remember playing on the original big, bulky Xbox, the black one, that was like 50 pounds. I played on that. I remember playing on the Nintendo 64, even though I'm not that old. I remember playing on the PS2, and Vice City was the hot thing. And I remember, all these different eras of console evolution. Um, so the thing is, like, if you're like 15 or 18, or if you're like, I don't know, 12, you're not going to remember when Dead Space first came out, maybe. Maybe you won't, because I do think it's an age thing. I think that basically what you have is normal now. So it's normal for there to be loot boxes. It's normal for most games to look like Call of Duty or Warzone, and Avengers that's streaming loot. I don't know what the hell it was called. That Avengers game that I never played because it was dog shit. Then you have games that look like uh, Midnight Suns, and if you look at them, they all look like the same sort of game. You know, Midnight Suns has decent gameplay. I played a little bit of it, but the rest of it kind of sucks, and you can kind of see it. The menu designs are all the same. All these games that are coming out or did come out were designed to be live service games where you can pay to get crystals and shards and all these other things to monetize them. And you see this especially when it comes to the, Gotham Knights, you play as Robin and Batgirl and stuff. You can just look at it and instantly tell this is going to be a live service game. It's like if you did a collage of all these games, they look the same. And it's hard to explain to people, at least for me, why I don't like them. And I want to wrap it up by saying I remember watching a video, and it's talking about cartoons and animation because I find it interesting. And somebody brought up Steven Universe. Steven Universe, I, I don't really like it. I'm gonna say that straight up. But I did want to learn about it because, again, animations is interesting to me. And they had this thing called Steven Bombs. What Steven Bombs were is when the show would go on hiatus for like months, half a year, sometimes even a full year or something. And they would do a Steven Bomb where they would put four or they would release 3 or 4 episodes back to back or and then they would go on hiatus again. And people who liked that show were annoyed about it. And I actually did have a friend and she liked the show. I'm like, okay, I don't like it, but she does. And she would talk about, oh, I gotta wait. Oh, that was it. And apparently the sentiment was she had waited like 6 months for a new episode to continue the story, and then it's just them goofing off at the house eating ice cream, and there's no progression to the plot. It's just I waited 6 months for that, but now that Steven Universe is over, I am aware that Steven aged up and that he ended the war or something. And now the diamonds are like cool and everyone's cool now. It's all cool. So, from what I understand, the series is more or less over. So, let's say right now you want to watch Steven Universe. You can literally do that. You can watch all the way from episode 1 to all the way up to now to where the war is over and they're all chilling in the pool and the diamonds are just hanging out, right? The series is over. But you weren't there from the beginning, you know? You weren't there to experience the hiatuses, the the episodes coming back and feeling disappointed. You don't remember actually thinking the story is going to be good and then it's just more BS. At least for me, because I found the episodes kind of boring. Because I'm like, oh, okay, this guy has magic rock powers. Oh, okay, now there's some monsters. There are these diamonds. They gotta fight and protect his family. Okay, classic story. Maybe. And then it's not. I don't like it. But that's a feeling you're not gonna get if you watch it now. You could basically binge through the entire series and not have the memories of the frustration of the storylines and this and that because you kind of skip all that, you know? And it's kind of like I remember watching, uh, I actually remember watching Doctor Who with David Tennant's era, and I personally love that era. I love David Tennant when he was the Doctor. And the episode, spoiler alert, where he regenerates and dies. Don't know if that's a spoiler for any Doctor Who fans. That was a big deal. That played all across America, and I remember people talking about it, and there being articles about it. And it actually was the most watched foreign television show in America at the time, and it was a big deal. And that's when Doctor Who was gaining a lot of American audiences and audiences from the West and all this other stuff. And it was really cool and a big deal. And you won't really get that same feeling as those people did then. You know what I mean? Waiting for every new episode, be like, oh, did you see that? Yeah, man, I just saw it last night. It's just a different feeling. And that's what I think it is when it comes to video games. And this is really going to be the end, I swear to God, is that because the loot boxes and because the games nowadays are modeled after uh, the live services like Warzone and Apex and Midnight Suns and all these other types of games, is that people kind of thought that was normal. And they don't really remember just playing like San Andreas or playing even GTA 4. GTA 5 is fine, but then we all know what happened there with the shark cards and all the bull crap. And I don't think people remember the feeling they got when they played a game that wasn't a live service. So I remember playing Battlefield, for instance, and Star Wars Battlefield, and getting a big map, and flying a vehicle and picking my buddies up in that vehicle and then dropping them off at the enemy base, and then they're piling on. I remember playing as the clones. I'm on the, I think, the Wookiee planet, but it's like the water, it's like little islands. And there was this vehicle that the clones drove, and I would fly it to the other side. I I think they had one gun on each side, so my buddies would have each gun, and then we would have one of them be a passenger, and he'd be shooting or something, and then we'd pick up some randoms, and I would drop them off. One guy would stay behind to shoot the turret. It was really cool. I remember doing that. It was really fun. And I remember being a droid on the Sky Planet. Sky Planet. With the floating towers. I forgot what map it was. I'm sorry. It was probably obvious. But I remember being a battle droid sniper, and I would be crouched, and I went prone, and I jumped on top of, I think a medical droid, and I was shooting through this gap because the wall was low, and I'm just sniping players. That was really cool, and being and shooting the AT-ATs with the turrets, and oh my God, the freaking jet spawned, and had my buddy jump in that and actually shoot the cables to fucking break the legs and destroy it. That was really fun and actually kind of cool to do when you pulled it off. I didn't get that in the new Battlefield game. And just because the graphics look nicer does not mean it's necessarily more fun or nicer to play, you know? And I don't care that people say, oh, but the graphics, yeah, if it's the graphics, you can't have it too big, because then that's fine. I understand that. How about instead of turning the graphics to 11, why not put it down to 9? Make it still look good, but then, because then if that's the case, how would you explain something like Apex? That's kind of graphically demanding. It's got a big area, it's got stuff going on. So I'm sure you could have done like, even if, but what about Warzone then? Warzone has 100 players going around the map, and drops and collision and all this other stuff. So Call of Duty Warzone's a thing, and Fortnite. So why? And they got portals and people turning to goo now. So why couldn't you have a Battlefield game that had, let's say, a few smaller areas, but then big team battles where you have vehicles and people driving on, all this stuff? Because that doesn't make any sense. And you can probably figure it out yourself by looking at the game's history and stuff, which is why I love to learn about these things. But basically, I don't think people talk about those old games because they don't have memories of them. And if they are older, then I don't get what the problem is. But that's just my take. I kind of miss the old BioWare. I kind of miss these older things. And I don't think that's necessarily nostalgia. I do truly believe that on a fundamental level, even though if you compare the graphics from then to now, okay, we're a little bit better. But I think on a fundamental gameplay level, these games were far superior in a lot of ways that people don't think about. And that's just my own opinion. Anyway, that's it. I'm gonna stop talking now. But yeah, have a good one, and yeah, have a good night.